I gave him my kidney to save his life. 6 months later I found him in bed with my best friend. But the worst part, Kang Jae-ho was already waiting for me downstairs, and he did not look surprised at all. My name is Grace Williams. I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia in a house where my mother kept a Bible on every table. She always said, Grace, when you love someone you love them all the way, no half measures, no conditions. I believed her. For 29 years I believed her. That belief is what put me in a hospital bed in Seoul, South Korea with 1 kidney instead of 2. Let me take you back. Daniel and I met in Atlanta. He was brilliant, the kind of man who walked into a room and made everyone feel like they had been waiting for him without knowing it. He had this laugh, deep and warm, it made you feel safe. We dated for 2 years before he proposed. I said yes before he finished the sentence. We were that couple. The kind people pointed at and said that is what love looks like. When Daniel's private equity firm started closing deals with Korean conglomerates, we decided to make the move. Seoul was temporary, we told ourselves. 1 year, maybe 2, long enough to build something real, then come home to Atlanta and start a family. I quit my marketing job, packed everything, left my mother crying at the airport with a handkerchief pressed to her face. I had no idea I was walking into a different life entirely. Seoul was beautiful and cold and precise. The kind of city that does not waste anything, not space, not words, not time. I loved it immediately. I threw myself into learning the language and the culture and the food. Daniel was working 18-hour days, but that was fine. I was building something too, freelance contracts, a small network, a life. And then 8 months after we arrived, Daniel got sick. It started with fatigue. He was tired in a way that sleep could not fix, then the swelling, then the blood. The doctors in Seoul delivered the news quietly and technically, like they were reading from a report that had nothing to do with the man sitting in front of them. Kidney failure, stage 4. Without a transplant, the timeline was not good. I remember sitting in that office with white walls and cold air and Daniel's voice traveling from somewhere far away. Daniel sat very still and very quiet. He did not cry. I did. I cried all the way home on the subway, pressing my face into my scarf so the other passengers would not see. And the entire ride one thought was circling my mind: what do I have to do to save him? I found out 2 weeks later that I was a match. The doctors said it was rare, a perfect compatibility. They explained the surgery and the risks and the recovery. Daniel told me no. He told me no loudly and then quietly, and then with his eyes filled with something I had never seen in him before. He said, Grace, you do not have to do this. I do not want you to do this, but I heard my mother's voice. When you love someone, you love them all the way. I signed the consent forms on a Tuesday morning. I did not tell my mother. I did not tell my friends back in Atlanta. I did not tell my co-workers. Only one person knew other than Daniel and the doctors. Yuna Park had been my closest friend since my 3rd month in Seoul. She found me at a language exchange meetup, sitting alone with a Korean phrasebook and a look on my face like I was about to give up. She sat down across from me, switched to perfect English, and said, you look like you need a friend more than a grammar lesson. She was right. Yuna was Korean and sharp and funny, and had this way of making you feel like you were the most interesting person she had ever met. She worked in corporate law, always dressed perfectly, always had a plan. I trusted her completely. She was the one who drove me to the hospital on surgery day. She held my hand in the prep room while Daniel paced the hallway. She told me I was the strongest woman she had ever met. She said, Grace, what you are doing for him, no one else would do that. He is so lucky to have you. I closed my eyes and believed every word. The surgery was 6 hours long, recovery was slow and painful. There were days I could not get out of bed without help. Daniel was attentive those first few weeks. He brought me soup, he sat with me, he read to me. He looked at me like I had saved his life, because I had. What I did not know was that while I was healing, something else was already growing in the dark. Something I would not see until it was too late to look away. 3 months after the surgery, I found out I was pregnant. I stood in our bathroom in the early morning with Seoul still dark outside, and the Han River just visible through the window. 2 lines. I sat down on the edge of the bathtub and I laughed. The kind of laugh that comes out when you did not know how badly you needed good news. I had given a piece of my body to save the man I loved, and now we were going to have a baby. It felt like a sign, like everything we had sacrificed was being paid back. I did not tell Daniel immediately. I wanted to do something special. I spent a whole afternoon planning a little dinner and bought a card and wrote inside it about how our family was growing. I never got to give him that card. Because by the time I was 5 months pregnant and still recovering from surgery, Daniel started to change. It was small at first. He came home later. He answered his phone in another room. He stopped asking about my doctor's appointments. I told myself it was work. The Can Group deal was massive. The entire fund's future depended on it. He was under pressure. I made excuses the way women who love the wrong people always do. I made excuses right up until the afternoon. I came home early from the hospital. I was not supposed to be home until 5, but my appointment ended early and I was tired and all I wanted was to lie down in my own bed. The elevator to our apartment felt slower than usual that day. I walked down the hall, the front door was unlocked. I thought that was strange. Daniel was supposed to be at a meeting until 7. I pushed the door open. The apartment was quiet but not empty. There were 2 glasses of wine on the counter, one with lipstick on the rim. I stood there for a moment. Then I heard something from the bedroom. I walked toward it the way you walk towards something you already know will break you, slowly. Like your body is trying to give you one last second of the life you had before. I pushed open the bedroom door. Daniel was in our bed, and Una was beside him. The same bed I had been sleeping in for 2 years. The same pillow I had cried into after surgery when the pain was too much. Everything in my body went still. Daniel saw me first. His face did not go guilty. It went calculating. Like he was already figuring out what to say. He said, "Grace, it is not what it looks like. It is always exactly what it looks like." Una sat up and looked at me with an expression I will never forget as long as I live. Not shame, not fear, calm. She said, "He chose me, Grace. I am pregnant too." The room tilted. I put my hand on the doorframe. I thought about the hospital and the consent forms and the surgery and the 6 hours I was unconscious while they took a piece of me out of my body and put it into his. I thought about her holding my hand in the prep room saying, "He is so lucky to have you." I could not speak. Daniel got up and started talking, but I could not hear the words. Something about the relationship starting before the surgery, something about being confused. Then he said something that cut through all the noise. He said, "You will be fine, Grace. You are strong. You always land on your feet." I looked at him standing in our bedroom and I thought, "You used me. You knew I would do it. You knew I would give you everything and you let me. Both of you planned this." I walked out of that apartment without saying a single word. I stood in the elevator going down, and that is when my phone rang. It was a number I did not recognize, a woman's voice, professional and precise. She said, "Ms. Grace Williams." I said yes. She said, "I am calling on behalf of Kang Jae-ho. He would like to meet with you. He is waiting downstairs." I looked at myself in the elevator mirror. My face was completely dry. No tears yet. Just this cold, carved-out feeling like someone had scooped out everything soft inside me. I pressed lobby, the doors opened, and there he was. I had heard the name before. Everyone in Seoul's business world had heard the name. Kang Jae-ho, chairman of the Kang Group, the man who had built one of Korea's most powerful conglomerates from nothing. 41 years old, unmarried, untouchable. The rumors about him were everywhere, that he had destroyed 3 companies whose CEOs crossed him. That he never raised his voice because he never needed to. Dangerous was the word people used when they thought he was not listening. He was standing in the lobby in a dark coat with his hands in his pockets, completely still. He was tall with sharp features and the kind of face that gave nothing away. He looked at me the way you look at a problem you have already solved. He said, "Ms. Williams, I know this is not a good time." I said, "You do not know anything about my time." Something moved in his expression, very small, almost not there. He said, "I know that Daniel Ose has been hiding significant debt inside his fund, debt connected to the Kang Group acquisition. I know your name is on documents he used to secure investor trust. And I know you did not know any of this." I stared at him. He said, "Sit down with me, 15 minutes, then you can decide what happens next." I did not sit down, but I did not walk away either. He said, "I am not here to hurt you, Ms. Williams. I am here because you are the only person in this situation who has not done anything wrong." That was the moment something shifted, not hope, not trust, not yet, but something. Kang Jae-ho gave me a folder. Inside it were printed copies of text messages between Una and Daniel going back 14 months, 2 months before my surgery. I read them in his car. He sat across from me in silence and let me read. Una had known about Daniel's kidney failure before I did. She had been with Daniel for months before I found out he was sick. And it was Una who had pushed me toward the surgery. I remembered the conversation now with a different light on it. We were at a coffee shop near Gyeongbok Palace. It was winter. She had wrapped her hands around her cup and looked at me and said, "Grace, if you love him, you will do it. You are the only one who can save him. Do you not want to be the one who saves him?" I had cried at that table. I had felt so certain and so clear about what I needed to do. She had engineered every word. She had sat in that prep room and held my hand and said he was lucky to have me while she was sleeping with him. The folder also contained financial documents. Daniel had been using Grace Williams as a trusted partner reference in his investor communications. My name, my credibility, my loyalty. Borrowed without my knowledge to make his fund look stable to the Kang Group's acquisition team. Kang Jae-ho said quietly he owes approximately $46 million more than he has disclosed. If this acquisition closes without correction, the Kang Group takes on that liability. I do not intend to let that happen. I closed the folder. I said, "What do you want from me?" He looked at me for a long moment. He said, "I want you to come to work for me." As a consultant on the acquisition audit, you know his operation better than anyone on my team. I said I was inside it because I trusted him. He said I know. That is exactly why I am asking you. There was a silence, then I asked the question that had been sitting at the back of my throat since the lobby. I said, why do you care what happens to me? He looked out the car window at the Seoul skyline. He said, I do not like it when people are used. I went to a hotel that night. I lay on the bed in my coat because I could not make myself move enough to take it off. I put my hand on my stomach. 5 months, I thought about my mother back in Atlanta. She would say, baby, come home, just come home. But I could not go home, not yet, not empty. Because Daniel had not just betrayed me. He had not just taken Una into our bed. He had used my name and my trust and the goodwill people had for me to build something fraudulent. And when it collapsed, my name would be on those documents. I could go home, or I could stay. I thought about Kang Jae-ho's face in the lobby, still as stone, not pitying me, not performing concern, just looking at me like I was a person who deserved a straight answer. I called him at 7 in the morning. I said I will take the consulting position, but I have conditions. He said name them. I named 4. He agreed to all of them without negotiating. I hung up and sat on the edge of the hotel bed. Then I got up, I washed my face, I put on the only clean blazer I had packed, and I went to war. The Kang Group headquarters was on the 38th floor of a glass tower in Uedo. Everything was precise and quiet in the way that power makes things quiet. Kang Jae-ho's team treated me with professional respect and personal caution. This black American woman who had appeared from nowhere with a connection to their chairman. I let them be cautious. I did not need them to like me. I needed access to the documents. I got it. For 3 weeks I worked 14-hour days. I went through every fund record Daniel's team had submitted, every disclosure, every investor communication. He was creative, I will give him that. The debt was buried in layers, shell interests, reclassified liabilities, loans from related parties listed as equity contributions. It was sophisticated work. And threaded through all of it in the transaction notes and communication chains was Una Park's legal firm. She had not just been his lover, she had been his architect, she had structured the documents, she had signed off on the disclosures. She had used her credentials and her license and her firm's reputation to give Daniel's fraud a legal face. They had built this together, while I was giving him a kidney, while I was carrying his child. I sat with that knowledge for a full night before I presented it to Kang Jae-ho. He read my report in silence, all 42 pages. He did not look surprised, he rarely looked anything. When he finished, he put the report down and said, this is thorough, Ms. Williams. I said, it is accurate. He said, the acquisition board meets in 4 days. Daniel will be there, so will Una's firm. I said, I know. He said, are you ready to present this? I looked at him. I said, I have been ready since the lobby. The boardroom was on the 41st floor, floor-to-ceiling glass on 3 sides. Seoul spread out below like a circuit board lit from underneath, the Han River visible in the distance. Silver and calm, there were 12 people in the room. Daniel walked in and did not see me at first. He was in his best suit. The navy one I had taken to the dry cleaner 3 times because he said it was his confidence suit. He was carrying his folder of disclosures and smiling at people and working the room. Then he turned toward the far end of the table and saw me. The smile did not disappear, it froze. Kang Jae-ho was already seated. He said nothing. He gestured toward the screen. I stood up. I said, good morning. My name is Grace Williams. I have been retained by the Kang Group to conduct an independent review of the acquisition disclosures submitted by Daniel Osai Capital Partners. Daniel was still standing. He said, what is this? I looked at him for exactly 2 seconds. Then I turned to the screen and began. I had 42 slides. I used 11. By slide 4, 2 board members had their phones out under the table. By slide 7, Daniel's lawyer had leaned over and was whispering urgently in his ear. By slide 11, the room was completely silent except for my voice. I showed them the hidden debt, the shell structures, the reclassified loans, the legal certifications signed by Una Park's firm. I showed them every layer. When I finished, I said the total undisclosed liability is $47.3 million. The acquisition as structured would transfer full responsibility for that liability to the Kang Group. I do not recommend proceeding under the current terms. I closed my laptop. The silence lasted 4 seconds. Then it broke apart into voices and movement and Daniel's lawyer standing up. Daniel pushed back his chair. He looked at me from across the room, and he said my name. Not loudly. Just my name, Grace, like he was just now understanding what he had thrown away. I picked up my folder and I walked out of that boardroom without looking back. The deal collapsed in 48 hours. Daniel's fund suspended operations pending investigation. His investors filed for an emergency review. 3 institutional backers withdrew before the week was out. Una's firm was placed under regulatory review. Her license was flagged. She called me. I did not answer. She called 3 more times. Then she sent a message that said, you do not understand what happened. There are things you do not know, please Grace. I had a recording of her in the prep room telling me to donate, telling me it was the right thing, telling me Daniel was lucky to have me. I sent it to the regulatory board. That was my answer. Kang Jae-ho told me what happened next the way he told me everything, briefly and factually. Daniel had been served with financial fraud charges. Yuna's firm had terminated her employment. Their assets were frozen pending investigation. He said it is done. I said almost. He looked at me. I said I need to file to remove my name from every document he used. I need my name clean. He said my legal team has already started that process. I stood there for a moment. I said you started it before I asked. He said I started it the day I called you in the lobby. I did not know what to say to that. He said you should rest Ms. Williams. My son was born in Seoul on a Tuesday morning in early spring. I named him Eton. It means strength. My mother flew in from Atlanta the week before and cried the whole first day and then rolled up her sleeves and became the most efficient person in the room. She was exactly what I needed. I was sitting in the hospital room on the third day with Eton asleep on my chest and Seoul quiet outside the window when my phone buzzed. It was Kang Jae-ho. He said I heard. Congratulations. I said how did you know already? A pause. He said I made it my business to know. Then he said the consulting contract is complete. But I have a permanent position available if you want it. Director of Risk and Acquisition Review, Seoul-based. The salary is significant. I looked down at Eton. I thought about Atlanta and going home and my mother's house and everything that felt safe and familiar. Then I thought about that boardroom, the silence, the 11 slides. The moment Daniel said my name like it was something he had lost. I said send me the terms. There was another pause. And then Kang Jae-ho said something he had never said in all the weeks I had worked with him. He said you did something today that most people would not have the strength to do. I said I just told the truth. He said that is the hardest thing in every room. I held Eton a little closer. There was one more thing I needed to know. I said that day in the lobby you knew Daniel had been using my name, you knew about the fraud, but you had been watching this deal for months. He said yes. I said so why did you wait? Why did you not expose it before? A silence, a longer one this time. He said because I was waiting to see what you would do when you found out. I let that sit. I said and he said you did not run. You came in and you did the work and you finished it. He said I needed to know if you could be trusted. I looked out at Seoul and the Han River in the distance and the city I had arrived in as someone's fiancé and was leaving as no one's anything except my own. I said and now you know. He said now I know. I hung up. I sat in that room for a long time. My mother came in and took Eton so I could sleep but I did not sleep. I thought about the woman who had walked off that elevator into the lobby 6 weeks ago, still in the coat she had left the apartment in. Hand on the doorframe of a life she thought she knew. I thought about Daniel's face in the boardroom, the frozen smile, my name in his mouth too late. I thought about Yuna in the prep room holding my hand and smiling. I thought about all the ways I had loved people all the way with no conditions like my mother taught me. And I thought that was never the wrong lesson. The wrong lesson would have been to stop. Eton made a small sound in his sleep. He had my nose. He had my mother's forehead. He looked like possibility. I whispered to him, you are going to know exactly who you are from the very beginning. Somewhere in Seoul, Kang Jae-ho was reading my terms. Somewhere across the city, Daniel was looking at the wreckage of everything he had chosen over me. And I was here, still here, with 1 kidney and 1 son and a job I had earned. My mother came back to the doorway and said, baby, are you okay? I looked at her. I said, I think I am just getting started. She smiled and pressed the Bible she always carried into my hands. I held it. And for the first time since that elevator, I felt the cold, carved-out place inside me beginning very slowly to fill. Not with him, not with anyone else yet, just with myself, just with Grace. Before part 2 drops, I need you to tell me something in the comments. When Grace walked into that boardroom, did she do the right thing? Or should she have walked away and taken her baby and gone back to Atlanta and never looked back? Because here is what I want you to think about. Daniel is going to get out of those charges, some of them. His lawyers are already working, and Yuna, she knows something about Kang Jae-ho. Something she used once a long time ago when they were not strangers. And Eton is Daniel's son, which means one day Daniel is going to come looking. The question is not whether he comes, the question is whether Grace lets Kang Jae-ho handle it or whether she handles it herself. Tell me in the comments what would you do. If this story made you feel something today, share it with one person who needed to hear it. Because Grace's story is not over, it is only just beginning, part 2 is coming. And nothing will prepare you for what Daniel does when he gets to the hospital. Life lesson. You cannot control what people do to you. You can only control what you do with what is left. Grace gave from love, she was betrayed, but she did not become bitter, she became precise. There is a difference between a woman who is broken and a woman who is quiet. Never confuse the two.